The sun dipped low over Los Angeles, casting a golden haze across the skyline. Traffic murmured in the distance, but here in Griffith Park, only the rustle of leaves and the crunch of dry soil underfoot disturbed the quiet. Julian Rivera stood alone on a dusty trail, staring into the dusky horizon. His phone buzzed in his hand, but he ignored it. Today was not about the world. It was about memory. Julian was 34, a history teacher at a downtown high school. He had a calm manner, thoughtful eyes, and the kind of quiet confidence people often mistook for indifference. But he carried a weight, a silence within him, carved out by an event he had never shared with anyone. He had returned to the park not for leisure, but because this was where it had started. 10 years ago, the worst day of his life. He felt its ghost in every shadow of the trees, in the faint smell of eucalyptus and dirt. That night, as Julian walked past the old amphitheater, his mind played tricks. A sudden cold swept over him, though the summer heat lingered. A movement at the edge of his vision made him stop. There by the stone wall stood someone. Or something. Watching. He blinked and it was gone. A chill crawled down his spine. He turned back, retreating down the slope, feet moving faster now, heart louder than the wind. His phone buzzed again. He glanced. A message from an unknown number. "Do you remember what you left behind?" Julian froze. He hadn't spoken of that day in a decade. Not to anyone. Not even to his therapist. And yet here it was, alive and pulsing in a message. He deleted the text and kept walking. But a sense of dread settled into his bones, as if the park itself remembered. Back in his apartment in Echo Park, Julian poured himself a glass of whiskey. He watched the ice melt slowly as his mind drifted back. He remembered the sound of her voice, the panic, the moment she let go of his hand. He remembered not looking back. The buzz of his phone again. Another message. "You can't run from the past, Julian. It knows your name." His hands trembled. Outside, the city thrived, oblivious. Inside, Julian felt the beginning of something stirring. Something he thought was buried. But the past never stays dead in Los Angeles. Not here. Not for him. The next morning, Julian woke to sunlight streaking through half-drawn blinds. His head ached, not from the whiskey, but from the weight of what had returned. The messages from the night before were gone. Deleted. He checked his phone's history, but there was nothing. No trace. Just silence. But the unease remained. As he stood brushing his teeth, he noticed it again, that strange feeling, like he was being watched. He leaned closer to the mirror, eyes scanning the reflection behind him. Nothing. Just the narrow hallway leading to his bedroom. Still, the skin on the back of his neck prickled. His phone rang. Unknown caller. He hesitated, then answered. Silence. Then a whisper, so faint he almost missed it. "You left her." Julian slammed the phone down. He told himself it was a prank. A cruel trick. Maybe one of his students had found something online. But deep down, he knew better. The memory clawed its way up. Her name had been Emily. A student, yes, but not one of his. She had been a friend of his younger sister, Anna. He'd met Emily through Anna's volunteer work at a downtown shelter. Emily was bright, curious, always asking questions about the past, about people long gone, about things best left undisturbed. That summer, 10 years ago, Anna, Emily and Julian had planned a hike through Griffith Park. Nothing serious, just a bit of exploration. But Emily had insisted they visit the old zoo, where cages still stood, rusted and forgotten. She said she'd found something there. Something buried. Julian never found out what it was. All he remembered was Emily's scream. And the moment her hand slipped from his. Back in the present, Julian's phone buzzed again. This time, a picture. A photograph. It showed him, as he was now in his apartment, from behind. Taken seconds ago. Julian spun around, heart thundering. The room was empty. He checked the locks. Windows. Nothing. He was alone. But someone had been watching. Someone close. He called the police, but the officer on the line sounded unconvinced. Could be a spoof app. Kids play games. Unless you're in danger, sir, There's not much we can do. He hung up, anger simmering under fear. This wasn't a game. That night, Julian stayed awake, lights on, curtains drawn. He sat by the window with an old photo album Anna had made, flipping through the years. Birthdays, holidays, smiles. Then he found it, a faded photo of that day in Griffith Park. Him, Anna, and Emily, standing in front of the iron bars of the old zoo. Emily's eyes were distant. Her hand clutched a small leather notebook. Julian stared. He had forgotten the notebook. She had said it contained stories, secrets, names. And just before she disappeared, she had whispered something to Anna. Julian closed the album, his fingers shaking. He needed to find Anna. She had left Los Angeles years ago. No contact. No social media. She had vanished just like Emily, though not in body. Only in spirit. But if anyone knew what was truly buried that day, it was Anna. And now it was time to dig it back up. Julian stared out the window as the city lights shimmered like distant stars. That night, he dreamed of shadows, of Anna running through an empty street, her face pale with fear, her voice swallowed by silence. He woke before dawn, breathless, the echo of her name still on his lips. By midday, he was driving through the edges of East Los Angeles, a place once familiar but now strange in its quiet hostility. He had traced Anna's last known address to a rundown apartment complex, the sort of place that blurred into the background of a city too big to care. He knocked on door number 6C. No answer. He knocked again. Harder. The door opened a crack. A woman peeked out. Thin, older, wearing a faded Lakers hoodie. Her eyes narrowed. "She doesn't live here anymore," she said before he could ask. "Gone. Years now." Julian showed her the photo of Anna and Emily. The woman blinked. Recognition flickered across her face. "I seen the girl once. The quiet one. She was always drawing things. Strange things. Circles. Eyes. Like she was trying to remember something." Julian felt his stomach twist. Did she say where she was going? The woman shook her head. But she left behind a box. Said if anyone came looking, especially a man with gray in his beard and guilt in his eyes, to give it to him. Julian stood frozen. She disappeared inside and returned moments later with a dusty shoebox. He thanked her, took the box, and drove away, hands trembling on the wheel. Back home, he opened it. Inside was Anna's old journal. Notebooks filled with erratic sketches, spirals, broken sentences, and fragments of memory. She's not gone. She's behind the veil. The girl knew their names. That's why they took her. They don't live in the future. They feed on it. Julian flipped to the back. Tucked inside the cover was a torn newspaper clipping dated July 2015. It was an article about a missing teenager, Emily Shore, last seen near Griffith Park. Authorities had found no leads. The case had gone cold. But scribbled across the headline in Anna's handwriting was a single word: return. He felt the room shift. It wasn't just about Emily or Anna. Something had been following them since that day in the park. Something tied to the notebook Emily carried, to the things she believed she had uncovered. Julian began researching late into the night. He found mentions of local folklore, whispers of an ancient cult once rooted in Los Angeles, obsessed with bending time, distorting memory, and sealing truth behind riddles. Stories of the keepers, who protected the veil between timelines, and of the marked, those who crossed the boundary and never returned. One name stood out: the Black Hollow Society. A name Anna had written dozens of times across her pages, always paired with one symbol, a jagged circle intersected by a line, like an eclipse carved into skin. Julian suddenly understood. This was never about ghosts. This was about something far older, far more dangerous. And if Anna had gone into hiding, it wasn't to run from guilt. It was to keep something or someone away. Julian shut the journal, his fingers tracing the strange symbol. He needed to find the place where it all began. The old zoo. Something was waiting there. Something buried beneath time itself. Julian arrived at Griffith Park just as dusk began to fall. The sky was painted in bruised shades of orange and violet, and the distant hum of the city faded behind the sound of dry leaves cracking beneath his boots. He hadn't been back here since that day, the day Emily vanished. The old zoo sat in eerie silence, its concrete cages crumbling with age, overgrown by roots and graffiti. It looked less like a forgotten tourist site and more like a graveyard. Julian made his way past the rusted bars and broken signage, clutching Anna's journal tightly. The strange symbol, the jagged eclipse, seemed etched into his mind now. Deep inside one of the collapsed animal pens, he found it. A stone slab, hidden behind a curtain of ivy. Just as Anna had drawn it in her journal, the same markings carved across its surface. Symbols that seemed to hum when he ran his fingers over them. Suddenly, he heard a voice. "You shouldn't be here." Julian turned. A man stood behind him, middle-aged, wearing a brown coat too warm for California. His eyes, sharp and distant, flicked to the journal in Julian's hand. "You've seen the veil," the man said. "You've felt its pull. That makes you a risk." Julian didn't back down. "I'm looking for my sister. Anna Shore. And Emily." The man exhaled slowly. Anna crossed. She saw the pattern. She left signs to guide others back. That was her mistake. Julian narrowed his eyes. "What is this place?" "What do you mean, crossed?" The man stepped closer. "There are places where time bleeds, where the past and future overlap like shadows at twilight. This zoo sits on one. It was never just an accident that brought Emily here. She was looking for them, the ones who feed on time, who consume memory." The Black Hollow Society opened the way. Julian felt a chill crawl up his spine. And Anna? She went after her, through the veil, trying to bring her back. But that world, it doesn't follow rules. It's a maze made of choices and regrets. You don't find people there. You find echoes. Julian stepped past him, closer to the stone slab. "Then I'm going through too." The man blocked his path. "You're not ready. If you go now, they'll find you before you find her. You need to remember before you step inside. Because once you cross, you'll forget things. Who you are. Why you came. That's how they win." Julian clenched his fists. "Then help me prepare." The man studied him, then nodded once. "There's a name. Cordelia." Julian flinched. It was the name Anna had whispered in her sleep when they were children. A name that had no meaning. Until now. She's the one who survived. The last person to return from the other side. Find her. She's the key. Julian glanced once more at the journal, at Anna's scattered thoughts, at the word return scribbled in desperation. He had been looking for answers. But now he knew this was a warning. And still, he was ready to go deeper. Into the city's forgotten layers. Into the folds of time. To find the one person who had made it back. Cordelia. Julian found her in a small house near the edge of Echo Park, a crumbling bungalow veiled in tangled vines and rusted wind chimes. It was the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking for it, forgotten, like its owner. He knocked once, twice. No answer. On the third knock, the door creaked open. A woman stood there, her gray hair knotted into a loose braid, eyes sharp but worn, as if she hadn't slept for years. She stared at Julian for a long moment before stepping aside. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Julian entered without replying. Her home was filled with ticking clocks. Dozens of them. All different sizes, shapes, sounds. None of them in sync. "You're Cordelia," he said. She didn't nod. She didn't need to. "You've been there," he added. At that, she closed the door. Cordelia sat in a creaking armchair and lit a candle, the flame flickering against a wall covered in notes, maps, and photographs. Julian reached into his bag and handed her Anna's journal. She leafed through it with trembling fingers. When she reached the page with the symbol, the jagged eclipse, she froze. "They're opening it again," she whispered. "The society. They never stopped." Julian sat opposite her. "My sister crossed over looking for a missing girl. Emily Shore. I think they took her. Anna went in after her." Cordelia didn't look up. "Then they're both lost." "No," Julian said. "Anna left me a trail. That means something." Cordelia finally looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Do you know what it means to cross?" she asked. "Time isn't linear over there. It's like a house of mirrors, where every door is a different version of your past. Your regrets, your lies. If you're not careful, you lose yourself." Julian leaned forward. "Help me. Tell me how to survive it." Cordelia stood slowly, walked to a drawer, and pulled out a small metal object. It was a pendant, half eclipse, half sun. "This will anchor you," she said. "As long as you hold it, you'll remember who you are. But once inside, the society will sense you. You'll have to move fast. Find the fractures in the city, the places where time leaks through." Griffith Park was one. So is the Bradbury Building. The old subway tunnels. Look for Anna's marks. Julian took the pendant. It was warm in his hand. "And how do I get in?" Cordelia turned away. "They'll let you in when they're ready to feed." Julian frowned. "Feed on what?" She looked at him then, eyes haunted. "On the parts of you you'll never get back." A long silence followed. The clocks ticked out of rhythm. Then she whispered, almost too softly to hear. "I went in to save my brother. I came out alone, but not empty." Julian stood, heart racing. "Where do I start?" Cordelia reached for a worn map of Los Angeles on the wall. Her finger tapped a red mark just above downtown. "The tunnels beneath Union Station. That's where the society holds their rights. That's where the veil is thinnest. But you need to go when the city's asleep." Julian nodded, slipping the pendant into his coat. "Tonight, then." As he stepped outside, the wind howled through the wind chimes. The clocks behind him ticked louder. Time was no longer on his side. But he was ready to cross. Los Angeles at night is a different creature. The noise dies, the lights dim, and the city's hidden heartbeat pulses louder. Julian moved through it like a shadow, hood pulled low, his steps careful. Cordelia's map was folded tightly in his jacket pocket, the pendant warm against his chest. Union Station loomed ahead, still majestic in its faded glory, still watched by ghosts in every tiled corner. He slipped past security, through a rusted service door Cordelia had marked. The air grew cooler as he descended. Dust thickened. Pipes moaned. And then the echo changed. Beneath the city was another world. The old subway tunnels were a maze of crumbling walls and forgotten tracks. Julian moved silently, flashlight flickering over graffiti-covered pillars and broken glass. Rats scurried at the edge of the light. Then he saw it. The mark. Anna's symbol, a jagged eclipse scratched into concrete, glowing faintly in the dark. He was on the right path. But he wasn't alone. A whisper floated through the air. Not sound, but memory. His mother's voice. He froze. "Julian, you should have come sooner." The sound brushed past him like cold wind. He turned sharply, but there was no one. "Keep moving," he told himself. The corridor narrowed. Cracks in the wall pulsed faint blue light. The veil was thinning here. Another mark. This one drawn in blood. Fresh. His heart pounded. He gripped the pendant tighter. Then voices. Real ones. He crept to the edge of a wider chamber. Hidden behind a rusted train car, he watched. 5 figures stood in a circle around a pit carved into the floor. They wore long coats, dark gloves, faces hidden by masks etched with runes. One of them held a girl by the shoulders. She was shaking, barefoot, barely conscious. "Emily," Julian whispered. The tallest figure raised a silver blade. The others began to chant. The language was ancient wrong. It twisted in Julian's ears. He had seconds. He picked up a broken pipe, tested its weight, then flung it at the nearest light fixture. It shattered. Darkness dropped like a curtain. The girl screamed. The chanting stopped. Julian ran. He grabbed Emily by the arm and pulled her back into the shadows. She was weak, but awake. "Stay with me," he whispered. Alarms rang in his mind. Footsteps pounded behind him. The society wasn't just chanting anymore. They were hunting. He turned corners blindly, following the glow of Anna's symbols like stars in the dark. The walls seemed to breathe. One cracked open, revealing a staircase leading down, and he could swear he saw Anna's handwriting etched into the rail. This way. Julian didn't hesitate. He carried Emily down into the dark, deeper than the tunnels, deeper than the city. The walls bent around them. Time stuttered. Emily moaned. "You're safe now," Julian said, though he didn't believe it. At the bottom of the stairs was a door. Metal. Ancient. Marked with the same symbol from Anna's journal. Julian pressed the pendant to it. It clicked. The door opened. And time collapsed. The door creaked open with a sound that felt older than language. A rush of stale air poured out, heavy with the weight of ages. Julian stepped forward, guiding Emily through the threshold as the metal door slid shut behind them with finality. Inside was a cavern unlike anything he had seen before. Massive pillars of quartz stretched from floor to ceiling, shimmering faintly with light that came from nowhere. The air buzzed with strange energy, a pressure that pressed against the skin and rang in the ears. This was not a tunnel. It was a sanctuary. Or perhaps a prison. Emily stirred weakly beside him. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpening with terror. "They're still here," she whispered. "I can hear them," whispering. Julian steadied her, glancing around. The symbols on the walls pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Some seemed to shift, rearranging themselves when he wasn't looking. Time was bending. He looked down at his hands. They flickered, glitching like a bad broadcast. His watch spun wildly before shattering with a soft pop. Seconds were slipping. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal. On it, a sphere of obsidian hovered, rotating slowly. Within its depths danced fragments of memory, flickers of other lives, other times. He approached. Anna's voice echoed in his head, not as sound, but as thought. "Touch it and see." He reached out, hesitating only a moment before his fingers met the surface. The world cracked. Pain lanced through his skull. His vision blurred, and then he was somewhere else. Standing in the same room, but it was younger. Polished. Lit by torches held in ornate sconces. The symbols glowed gold. Robed figures moved about with purpose, including a younger Cordelia, her eyes unclouded and sharp. Anna was there, alive. She turned, met his gaze. She did not seem surprised. "You're not supposed to be here," she said softly. Julian tried to speak, but no sound came. "You've broken the veil. It's too thin now. They're waking up. The ones outside time." The vision shuddered, cracked, and split into fragments. He saw the desert. His mother. Blood on stone. He saw Los Angeles burning, swallowed by a storm of clocks and mirrors. He saw himself, older, holding Emily's hand as they ran through a city where day and night bled together. And then it was gone. Julian collapsed back into the chamber. Emily caught him, trembling. "What did you see?" she asked. "Everything," he gasped. "Everything that was, and everything that could be." Behind them, the symbols flared bright white. A new doorway appeared, but it was unstable, flickering. They had only moments. From the passage behind, the masked figures of the society emerged. The leader's voice was cold and clear. "You've opened the wound. The city will bleed." Emily stepped forward, defiant despite her fear. "We won't let you destroy it." "You already have," the figure replied, lifting his hand. Power coiled around his fingers. Julian grabbed Emily's wrist. "Run." They dove through the new doorway as the chamber exploded in light and sound. The veil screamed, and time finally began to tear. Julian and Emily landed hard, tumbling onto cold stone. Around them, the world flickered like a dying screen. They were in a corridor, not of earth or steel, but something older. The walls throbbed with impossible color, tones beyond the spectrum of human eyes. The air was dense, like breathing through memory. This was the in-between. The space between seconds. Time itself had no meaning here. Emily stood slowly, her skin marked with veins of glowing blue light, as if the temporal current had left fingerprints. She stared at Julian. "You're changing," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "So are you," he replied, seeing the same fractal shimmer in her eyes. Footsteps echoed from behind them, but they didn't belong to anything living. Each step was a chime, every sound layered atop another, like a chorus of forgotten lives. Julian turned and, for the first time, saw them. The ones outside time. They were tall, thin silhouettes, not quite human, their limbs slightly too long, their faces blank like porcelain masks. They moved in a way that hurt the mind to watch, as if their bodies existed in several places at once. And they were coming. "Don't look at them," Emily whispered. "They feed on memory." The figures reached toward the walls, touching the pulsing surfaces. Memories spilled out. Visions of Los Angeles streets, birthday cakes, funerals, quiet sunsets, old arguments, all sucked into the void. "They're feeding," Julian said. "Draining everything real." "We need to find the exit," Emily urged, pulling him forward. They ran. Each turn led to a different version of the corridor. In one, they passed a window and saw the city in ruins. In another, the sky was an endless film reel spinning too fast. One door opened onto a memory of Julian's childhood, his mother smiling, alive and warm. He stopped, hypnotized. She reached out to him. "Come home," she whispered. "It wasn't real." Emily screamed. "Julian, don't let it take you." He pulled back just as the illusion cracked and collapsed into dust. The corridor stabilized for a heartbeat. At the end, a single door remained. Golden. Still. A symbol blazed above it, the same one that had appeared on Anna's drawings. Julian pushed it open. They stepped into silence. A vast hall stretched before them, lined with mirrors. Each reflection showed a different version of themselves. In one, Emily was alone. In another, Julian wore the society's mask. Another showed them older, scarred, standing over the ruins of the city. In every mirror, time was different. "This is the center," Emily said. "The root of it all." Julian nodded. "Then this is where we break it." Behind them, the timeless figures approached. But something shifted. From one of the mirrors, a figure stepped out. It was Anna, or what was left of her. Her body flickered with static, her voice fragmented. "You're close," she said. "But the sacrifice is coming. One of you must remain." Julian froze. "Remain? What do you mean?" Anna looked at Emily. "Only one can go back. The other must anchor the breach, or the city will be lost." Emily paled. "Julian." The hall began to collapse. Mirrors shattered, flinging shards of memory into the void. The figure screamed, disintegrating as time began to recoil. There was no more time to decide. Julian took a step forward and made his choice. Julian stood still for just a moment longer, as if absorbing the weight of eternity in a single breath. The shattering of time around them was deafening. The center of the hall pulsed violently, a heart with no body, and the pull of the collapsing timeline began to drag everything inward. Emily grabbed his arm. "We both make it. We find another way." "There is no other way," Julian replied quietly. His voice was calm, unnaturally so, as if he had already become part of something beyond time. But the hall, the mirrors, the memories, even the echoes of the city, fought to hold form. The breach had become unstable. Through the only mirror that remained unbroken, Julian could see Los Angeles at dawn. It was their way back. "You can still return," Anna's fractured voice repeated. "But the timeline requires a constant. Someone must become the anchor, or everything unravels." Julian turned to Emily, taking her hands. "You've always seen the patterns clearer than anyone. You can fix what's coming next. I'm the broken piece." "No," Emily said, her voice cracking. "You're the reason we made it this far." The first collapse began. The ceiling above them warped, stretching into a ribbon of dark, fluid time. One of the timeless figures emerged from the swirl, now fractured, twitching uncontrollably. It screamed, not in sound, but in pure memory. It was dying, or perhaps being born in reverse. Anna stepped forward, her form glitching in and out of presence. "If neither of you chooses," she said, Then the breach swallows the city. The timeline dies. Time becomes the grave. Emily stepped toward the anchor point, the shimmering core of the chamber. Then let it be me. Julian grabbed her wrist.
No.
This is my fault. I brought us here. The chamber cracked again. Time was running out. And then something shifted. A voice, not Anna's, echoed across the collapsing dimensions. A child's voice. Familiar. Don't go, Julian. He looked to the side. One of the mirrors showed a little boy, his younger self, standing alone in the middle of an empty street in East Hollywood. Behind him, the skyline flickered between day and night. I never learned how to let go, Julian whispered. Emily looked at him, then at the breach. Her face hardened with resolve. Then maybe you don't have to. She turned toward the breach and ran. Julian screamed. Emily. But it was too late. She threw herself into the core. And for a moment, everything paused. Light, memory, time all froze. Then, reversal. A shockwave blasted outward from the core. The breach closed with a sound like all the clocks in the world resetting at once. The chamber began to fade. Julian stood alone. Anna was gone. The figures were gone. Only the last mirror remained. Julian stepped through and found himself back on the rooftop of the parking structure in Los Angeles. Sirens in the distance. The sky was still dark, but no longer fractured. No ripples. No holes. Time had resumed. But Emily was gone. Julian fell to his knees. She had anchored the breach, sacrificed herself to save the timeline, to save the city. And now he was alone in a fixed world. Weeks had passed since the timeline reset. The city moved on, unaware of the catastrophe it had narrowly escaped. No news outlets reported the breach. No one questioned the strange stillness that followed the tremor no seismograph had recorded. Julian wandered the streets of Los Angeles, like a ghost among the living. He often ended up near the rooftop parking lot where it had all ended, or begun, or both. Memories of Emily lingered in the corners of his vision, just out of reach, like echoes that refused to fade completely. He no longer saw Anna. The mirrors were gone. No flickers. No ruptures. Time had stabilized, but he had not. Then, one quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Julian heard a sound he hadn't expected to hear again. A soft chime. Familiar. It came from a small alley behind a closed bookstore in Los Feliz. He followed it cautiously, heart pounding. At the end of the alley stood a mirror, tall, clean, and untouched by dust or graffiti. He hadn't seen one since the collapse. Julian stepped closer. At first, his own reflection greeted him, but then it blinked and smiled. Not his smile, Emily's. He stumbled back. No. You're gone. Her voice came through the glass, muffled but certain. I'm not gone. I'm just not here. Julian reached out, touching the mirror's surface. It was cool, solid, real. I anchored the breach, she said. But it doesn't mean I vanished. I became part of time's foundation. I see everything now. Past, future, and choices still unwritten. He shook his head. Why show yourself now? Because you need to let go. You can't keep holding your breath in a world that's moving again. Tears welled in his eyes. I don't know how. She smiled softly. Yes, you do. You always did. You just needed time to catch up. The mirror began to dim, fading at the edges. Wait, don't go, not yet. One last thing, Emily said. You saved the city, Julian. Now save yourself. The mirror shimmered once more, then went still. Just a mirror again. Just his reflection. Julian stood there a long while, watching the streetlights flicker to life. That night, he returned to his apartment and dusted off the corkboard. He pinned up maps, notes, and timelines again, not to fix time, but to understand it, to honor it, to remember what they had seen, and what they had survived. He began writing. Not reports. Not classified entries. But a story. He titled it, What's the Worst Thing That's Ever Happened to You? Because sometimes the worst thing that ever happens becomes the reason you find your way back. And the world, broken though it is, keeps turning. Because someone chose to stay behind. Because someone else chose to go on. And because time, no matter how fractured, always wants to be whole.